Good afternoon. I'm Perry Bacon. I'm the host of the New Republic show right now. I'm joined today by Maurice Mitchell. He's the head of Working Families Party, which works to elect candidates, Democrats and some non-Democrats across the country who push for progressive policy change. So Maurice, welcome.
It's good to be with you.
Good to see you. So talk about last night, like when it was called. I know you've been working with, on this, not only with Mandani, but more importantly, you've been working to help elect this kind of candidate for a long time. So what was it like when it was called for him?
It's hard to put into words. I was at the victory party. It was electric. And what I saw represented at the victory party were folks from grassroots organizations, folks from unions, folks from the DSA, folks from the Working Families Party, uh, a lot of young people of all races, but people of all generations coming together and being the expression of the movement and the candidacy that Zoran was able to build. And at the Working Families Party, what we've always shared was our belief that we could build majorities and we could create a solidarity politics that include people of all stripes around an agenda that focuses like a laser on what working people are saying, and what working people have been saying for a very long time is that affordability is a crisis, right? And there are real reasons for that. And the billionaires that spent more than $20 million against Zoran are the actual reason for it, right? And so, on top of Zoran running on affordability and running on free buses and childcare and a rent freeze, he was also running against those billionaires. He was also running against Trump. And so there were villains, Trump and his MAGA billionaires, and also the billionaires behind Cuomo and some of the oligarchs inside of the Democratic Party, right? Let's be clear about that. And the heroes were the people, right? What Zoran said in his victory speech, he said to Trump, he reserved some time to speak directly to Trump, and he said, before you could get to any of us, you have to get through all of us. And so I think the campaign really exuded that type of solidarity politics that we as the Working Families Party believe that is how we'll be able to defeat authoritarianism.
I want to emphasize in this case that it seems like he didn't just defeat his opponent. He defeated the billionaire class. He defeated Trump. He defeated some Democrats who were against him. He defeated, in some ways, I hate to say this, the New York Times coverage was at times like over the top, crazy bias against him. So this was a big, the people lined up against him. Like, I respect Senator Schumer, but who would not endorse him. Senator Gillibrand would not endorse him. This is a win in the sense that he beat a lot of forces. This is not just what happened in Virginia and New Jersey, where you beat a standard person in the party. He had to beat the power structure, right?
Yes. Not only did he and we defeat the New York Times, but we also defeated the New York Post, right?
So, the Wall Street Journal in some ways, yeah.
Journal, right? I mean, and to me, what that says is that there are a set of elite politics that are shared across the two major parties, and sometimes, like, there are a set of elite benefactors that support both of the major parties. And to be clear, one party is an authoritarian fascist party, but the other party is a status quo party. And I think it speaks to a desire, a hunger for this third space in American politics that Zoran was able to capture, that the Working Families Party has been designed to build. This third space in American politics that are anchored to the interest of everyday people, labor unions, grassroots organizations, and activists coming from the grassroots, the same way that the two major parties are generally anchored to the interest of different members of the Wall Street class, sometimes the same billionaires, folks in APAC, AI, crypto, pharma, the real estate lobby, and the Fraternal Order of Police. And so I think what's so powerful about Zoran's victory, and it was a resounding victory. I mean, by any measure, this is a clear mandate, right? What's great about it is not only that he won, but how he won. how he was able to construct that coalition. The fact that after the primary election, where the Working Families Party was deeply involved, after the primary election, the campaign did not rest on its laurels, and there was a laser-like focus on building the tent, going beyond the primary victory coalition and continuing to argue to people who either didn't vote in the primary or voted for one of his primary opponents, right? And that obsession with creating a bigger we is how we build a politics that can defeat authoritarianism.
Let me focus on two parts of the win I want to focus on specifically. It appears, according to the exit polls, are always messy, but there's been this narrative that progressive candidates can't win black voters, can't win Latino voters, can't win minorities, can't win lower income voters. It appeared, looking at the data, that he won all those groups. So talk about that a little bit. Was that was always a myth to me, but talk about why that was debunked last night.
I mean, so there's nothing like the data. So Zoran Mamdani won black voters. I think he won like 83% of black voters, under 30. Yes. He won black voters, older black voters. He won so many different demographic groups that there's very little ground to stand on to declare anything but a resounding, what we like to call a mollywhopping, like a resounding victory. And then there's this narrative that only upper middle class people actually want things like free buses or rent trees. I mean, he won the vast majority of middle class and working class voters who are earning under $100,000. It was Cuomo that won. Yes. And so that narrative is flipped on its head. This is a bad day for all the folks who claim that this type of politics only would appeal to a certain segment of the electorate, or were some sort of elite politics. Everyday people embrace this candidacy, and also it's a mark to how the campaign was run. Again, like winning with a coalition that brought the primary victory to fore, but then not in any way ceasing with on building on that momentum in order to reach out to, folks inside of the Democratic Party that is not part of the Working Families Party Zoran wing of the of that coalition, right? And winning them over and gaining endorsements of a number of labor unions that were with his opponents, gaining endorsements with a number of local elected officials, that were not necessarily aligned or not part of our coalition. That is what politics is about, and doing it well. And recognizing that if you're going to govern, you have to govern the entire city, which means like this mandate was important. Winning more than 1 million voters was important. Having 15%, I think we're still counting, but 15% of the vote come from the Working Families Party line, and having the Working Families Party,
including the candidate himself, correct?
Yes, it's that including the candidate. All three of the citywide elected officials, Zoran Mamdani, who's the incoming mayor, Jumani Williams, who will be the public advocate, and the outgoing comptroller, Brad Lander, all of them voted on the Working Families Party line, and all of them are members of the Working Families Party, and come through our politics. So this is also, this is a big day for the Working Families Party. Like we had independent Working Families Party elected officials win in Connecticut and New York, that people who didn't run as Democrats at all, right? So like this is actually, I think, a clear victory for the style of politics that we've been arguing for more than 20 years.
Okay, so Zoran is, I'm going to say, good looking, charismatic, charming. He's running in New York City. He's running on free buses, public grocery stores. Those ideas might not resonate as much in Des Moines or places where it's easier to drive. I live in Louisville. Free buses is not going to make people go crazy. So what can we take? We're not going to have a Zoran everywhere, and everywhere is not New York City. So what can you take other places? I know that you've lived a long time, but what can you do other places?
Yeah. I think it's important for people to understand that every election is won on its own merits, and every city or county or state has its particular features, right? But Zoran is a very New York candidate, and he loves the city, and he loves the people of New York, and you need to recruit candidates that actually want the job, love their community. Yeah, right, right. And that's really important. And that person will look different based on where you're at. But what I would say is that as resounding and clear as John's victory is, um, WFP aligned mayors, executives won in most major cities in New York State, in Albany, in Syracuse, in Buffalo. And so he's going to have a set of executives in most of the major cities in New York State who he's going to be working with in order to make sure that that agenda that look, free buses is the agenda that he ran out in New York in New York City, but an agenda of at a time when the federal government is pulling away, New York State and cities like New York and Buffalo are going to need revenue. We're going to have to tax billionaires and tax corporations to make that happen. And he's going to have a set of executives that are going to be attempting to collaborate with Kathy Hochul, who is no leftist, in order to make that happen, right? But also, I mean, we saw victories outside of New York City. In Dayton, Ohio, Shanice Turner Salas, she's one of our candidates. We endorse her. A huge upset. She defeated the incumbent, right? And she's also steeped in our politics and the same coalition that.
What city is she in?
In Dayton, Ohio.
So if you don't mind, tell me about her platform. I'm sure you have memorized it. What's her platform? Just generally, what is a WFP candidates like when they're not in New York is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. I mean, similarly, she ran on affordability, right?
What does affordability mean there?
Well, affordability there means basically being able to afford housing, right? Which consistently, like when people talk about affordability, they are talking about basic needs. But again and again, we poll this. Everybody is talking about housing, right? And in New York, the version in New York is the rent freeze that's not available to everybody, right? Why I think that there's lessons that could be learned, that could be extrapolated, is when we think about what is at the root of affordability, it's dignity, right? Because people are working really hard, working 40 hours or more, doing really tough jobs, and left at the end of the month with the inability to take care of themselves and their families. And so, like, emotionally, that is the deep horror and concern for most Americans. Now, a majority of Americans, like people say, the bottom 60%. Like that's another way of just saying most people.
It's a big number, right? Exactly. Yes.
Right. And people are desperate for politics that can make a difference in this crisis of dignity. That's one way of thinking about the affordability crisis. And candidates that show compassion and that show that they're willing in an authentic way to wake up every single day and focus on that crisis are able to inspire their neighbors to believe again and to have some hope again. I think also candidates that speak not just about Trump and how bad Trump is, but actually develop a hunger for what we're fighting for, and are willing to roll up their sleeves and say, I am going to fight day one and every day. That's something that could translate in every region of the country. But in order to tell a compelling story about affordability, there needs to be some villains, right? And it's actually really popular, not just in New York, but all across the country, and not just with progressives or with democratic socialists or whoever, like a lot of people, to tax the wealthy, to tax corporations in order to fund the things that we all agree we should fund, right? And I think that is a recipe. I think, again, one of the things that we're interested in looking forward to is actually arguing for a set of guarantees that everyday people, regardless of where you are, should rely on in the richest country in the history of countries. A guarantee that you could have a quality job if you're willing to put in the work, and that the money left over should allow you to be able to have like housing you could afford, and childcare you could afford, and healthcare you could afford. That I mean, that should be standard in the richest country in the history of countries, and most people agree with that. It turns out that is a transpartisan value, and it's something that I think a lot of people could run on. And there's a lot of policy space open to run on those guarantees.
All right, so I've got three questions. We'll go through them somewhat quickly, so I know you got to go. All right, the first is, this is a hard question, but I know we need to have a big coalition to defeat fascism. At the
Yes.
same time, I'm mad that Kristen Gillibrand said a bunch of, I'm going to say, racist crap about Mandani. I'm mad that Chuck Schumer could not endorse the Democratic nominee. I'm mad that Abigail Spanberger spent the Monday before the election trashing someone not running in her state. Like, trashing may be hard, but those words were not complimentary. What do we do when, if you're on this side of the coalition, if the other side doesn't want to respect? Mandani ran a great campaign. Like, why can't these people show him dignity and respect?
Well, in politics, nothing resets politics like winning. So it'd be interesting to see the statements of those individuals now. The thing that I'll say is that this Big Ten conversation is lopsided, right? Because what I see is a set of people that I work with who understand the assignment, who understand that there's two things, right? Big, we're talking about a Big Ten. Yes, I call it the Cheney to Chomsky Big Ten. That's right. I'm all for that. I'm all for people who disagree on many, many things, agreeing that we need to defeat authoritarianism and fascism. But that requires some conditions to make that happen, which means like, yeah, grow your faction, right? Run on your strategy, but no faction should be taking incoming from another faction if we agree that the primary concern is fascism. And what I see on one side are candidates like Zoran that they don't take the bait. They're very clear about who they are. They're very like, nobody confuses Zoran with Chuck Schumer, right? But also, Zoran is saving his energy to challenge the billionaire class, to challenge Trump, and to not belittle himself into these internecine fights with the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. What he's focusing on is building power to demonstrate and to argue that his position and strategy is the strategy. Because I do think that there is a fight to be had on the direction and the leadership of the Big Tent. But the way you do that is by placing your strategy next to the other strategy and seeing which one prevails, not by taking shots and engaging in Twitter figures, or doing things that I find to be like counterproductive. Look, like if this was the fourth quarter of a game, and you had a bench player get on the field, get on the court, and that bench player is on fire, you give them the rock, right? And so if we're in this united front and there's different factions and there's somebody on fire in one of the factions, you give them the rock if the main objective is to defeat fascism. And I didn't see that type of play with many of these folks. And to me, I think the best, the best victory, the best way to challenge them is through victory, right? Like, I don't think the best way to challenge them is through, op-eds in the New York Times or New York Post and like engaging in these elite opinion wars. It's by making sure that those voters turn out based on our strategy, which is what happened yesterday. So, to people who are frustrated with, those folks, I completely identify with that frustration, and I channel it into organizing. The best way to defeat them is by defeating them with the people, and by demonstrating that there's an appetite for our strategy. And that's how we show that we should lead. And I think, like, at the end of the day, when Zoran won in June, a lot of Democratic Party strategists, they ripped up their playbook and they started focusing on affordability. So whether or not they like Zoran or they want to be associated with Zoran, they're running the Zoran playbook.
Brandon Johnson won election a few years ago. I was excited about that. You all supported him in Chicago. I think it's fair to say that he's faced a lot of resistance from the establishment there, from the corporations, from the media there, from sometimes Democrats themselves. His approval rating is quite low right now. That's unfortunate. He had a hard time winning re-election right now. So I'm not again. I support Brandon. I think he tried his best, but what can people what can Zoran do, and what can the movement do to avoid to have a better situation than what's happening in Chicago?
Well, um, well, one thing I want to say about Brandon is that in this particular moment, he's demonstrating.
That's true. That's a good point, actually. Yes.
Like in this particular moment, he is demonstrating
Ice spikes and so on. Yes. Yeah, I agree.
why we were so proud to elect him to begin with, and he is beginning to build and rebuild a coalition that is strongly behind his leadership against Trump and ICE and everything else. So I just want to say that we're seeing fighting Brandon right when we need him, and we're really excited about that. But what I would say is, like, I think ultimately the lesson. I mean, you talked about it. In every one of these major cities, we do not have a neutral or curious press corps, right? We have a in the tank for capital press, right? Who have already written the headlines about the folly of progressive governance. That's just the reality. And so what I feel like we continue to learn is that we need to tell the story often. We need to tell the story forcefully, and we can't allow the mediating factor of that press corps and the major papers to be the folks who write the story. And like, I think Zoran being an excellent communicator and leveraging social media so effectively so early was a way to get a jump on the traditional media. And the fact that initially Zoran was not considered serious news for a lot of them. And so he was able to define himself before they were able to define him. And I think we're going to continue to lean into that. Like at the end of the day, the propaganda war is the is the front of the war that defines you. And being relentless in that, I think, is going to be critical, not just in defining him as a candidate, but defining the governing project.
And again, I think I said at three. And the last question will be about what's happening in Maine. The tree question is like, I think on the one hand, Plattner, I would argue, is doing some of the talking about real concerns. The crowds are real. I've not been up there yet. My reporter friends tell me there are a ton of people there, all ages. Maine is mostly white, but demographically diverse otherwise. And so on the other hand, I don't want to fall into this trap of like, we have to chase white men and that means Nazi tattoos are okay or or like saying racist stuff is okay or saying black people don't tip or all that. He's apologized for these comments, but these are not great comments. So without getting into like Plattner too much, where are we where do you see kind of where we are beyond Mandani in terms of like, does the party appreciating different kinds of candidates on how should that look?
Look, again, I build the Working Families Party, right? But what I see at the Democratic Party is a party that is in some ways deeply conflicted, right? Deeply conflicted about, and maybe at some point slightly ambivalent about whether or not it is the job of political parties to seek to win, right? If they're interested in focusing on what is clearly the clear opening for them as a party, which is to be the party that is in opposition to MAGA, but also is deeply connected to and willing to throw elbows for the working class, right? It seems unclear if that's the party that they want to be, and there's a lot of conflict around that. And I can't speak to Plattner. Like, we don't have a presence in Maine. We haven't, endorsed in that race. We may or may not. But I can say that I can declare, yes, that Nazi tattoos are bad. Right? That saying racist things are bad. Also, it's also true that people have stories and people have past, and like people are complicated. I don't think we should be chasing anybody. And there's a reason why he's commanding all of those crowds, right? I think it has a lot
What do
to.
you think that reason is? Well, because I've been impressed by the crowds.
Yeah, I mean, I look, I travel all across the country, and the stuff that I used to obsess about is just plain as day to most people. Most people see that there is one party that they think is crazy. They Most people who aren't like fanatical Trump people think Trump is either a lot or a little crazy, and the Republican Party is a lot or a little crazy. Like most people believe that, and I actually think that that's true. And most people think that the Democratic Party are weak, are status quo, and aren't willing to fight for very much. Like most people, even people who are Democrats, kind of believe that to be true. And when faced with those as the only two options, that could either bring people to cynicism, bring people to at least where the energy is, and the movement energy, unfortunately, is with right. But there's this third space that people are hungry for, because it's not like either of those two options are exciting to people who are not fanatical Trump people. The third space is the space that is clearly the space of the non-status quo, insurgent energy, which could be articulated in so many ways. But people just want to know: are you on the take, or like, are you accepting all of this corporate PAC money or not? Right? Like, I don't know if you saw like uh, uh, um, Senator Cory Booker, as he like got laced with all these questions around him taking like APAC money, and like he just
that podcast recently.
yeah.
He did not handle it. I like Cory Booker. He did not handle it particularly well. Yeah.
Yeah. People just wanted to know, like, people want to know, like, are you on the take? Like, are you taking this corporate money or not? Okay, are you going to fight for me? Are you going to stand up against the status quo and all the oligarchs? And like, do you have a one-word answer to all these questions or not? And the people that are able to have one-word answers to those questions, and also are able to communicate those in ways that are authentic, are able to command those crowds, and are being rewarded in this moment where people want fighters. But it's like, the fighting needs to make sense, right? And it can't just be performative, right? And you have to be willing to throw elbows against the establishment in the right wing, but sometimes oftentimes for us, the establishment in the Democratic Party. And those folks that are willing to do that, I think are being able to tap into that groundswell of energy that's happening in the grassroots. And I think he's been really effective at doing that. I think that's why you're seeing those crowds.
It's a great place to end. Maurice Mitchell, congratulations on last night, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you.